Well, hi, Danielle. Thank you so much for joining me here. I'm really excited for this conversation. Ever since I found your article in particular about social media and do we really need it? Kind of just questioning, like, what point does it have in our business? And I think it's a really powerful question, especially given my recent on-marketing experiment. So I would love to know if you would share, like, what is your relationship with social media like now? And what do you see happening both for yourself and with your clients?
Good question. And yeah, thank you for inviting me to have this chat with you. So where do I start? I guess to give a little bit of history, when I first was starting my business, I was very much involved in Facebook groups. And that was certainly it worked really well for me actually as a business strategy. But in hindsight, it was very exhausting. And I ended up having like this sort of when I look back, low-level anxiety all the time because I was always thinking about how's my post going, and it was just that whole what's going on. And I'd wake up first thing in the morning and do all of that, and it probably felt a little bit like, and this is my issue more than anything, a little bit schoolyard-ish, bringing up maybe that kind of schoolyard dynamic for me, which maybe is why it made it a little bit stressful. So then I realized that this was not good for my well-being. And I had actually already started to bring more focus onto my Facebook page. And it's interesting. I have a mentor that I catch up with every month or so, just to generally debrief. And I knew that I had to tell someone that I was going to have this experiment myself, which was like 30 days without posting in this particular group, because it was such a big deal for me. Like it was like, oh my God, like if I didn't tell someone, I felt like I wouldn't be accountable. So I had this whole session with her about, not posting in this group. It was that big of a deal for me.
Wow.
And I remember after 3 days, I was just like, oh my God, it just felt so different. I was just like, and I really, in that moment, I knew that I wouldn't be going back in the way I was. I did go back a little bit, but generally I was just like, no, that chapter's over. I need to move on. And I have found that posting to my own Facebook page was not as stressful or not as maybe time consuming, that kind of thing. But what I realized is that as, I decided to post less, right? So instead of going, all right, well, I must post 3 to 4 times a week or whatever, or every day, I was like, my goal became to post less, right? So, and that was actually kind of liberating, but at the same time, maybe a bit hard, because what I realized is that really it's every couple of weeks that I have a post that's really highly resonant and I get a lot of conversation, and I'm like, well, what if I just took out the other stuff, and like made it more potent, right? So I did that, and I think even now I don't really have a goal, but I roughly post, a couple of times a week. I do aim to post actually a piece of content that is I have this whole messaging framework, and I have this document called the Message Organizer, and I've got a new message organizer. I've revised my messaging. So my little goal at the moment is just like create a piece out of that from that document once a week. Mm-hmm. So, people like, you've probably come across Alexandra Fraser, have you, Stephanie?
I don't think I have, no.
Okay, so she was the person I came across a number of years ago now that was like, wrote this blog about being in business without social media. And it talked about how she deleted all her accounts, and I was like, jaw drop, like, what? And she's still in business? Oh my God. So I was, that really fascinated and called to me. So I guess where it lies for me personally, and then I'll speak a little bit to what I notice with my clients, is yeah, I did really question what role does social media have? And that was a result of me going, I would feel this kind of growing pressure, even recently, like 4 days might go past and it'd be like, Dani, you need to post something, you need to post something. But I was busy, I was just doing other things that were more important really in my business. And then I had to go, hold on a minute. Let's just have another look at where my clients are coming from. And I have a pretty, I guess, a thorough process that enables me to do that. When people sign up for my list, they need to say how they find out about me. And so having a fresh look at that, I realized that 80% of people were finding me through a blog post, right? Which, and then that leads them to either another video or like I do have a course that relates to that blog post. So I'm like, okay, so there's that. The other 20% are coming from a small handful of people that, we've worked together in some way, either I with them with me, something like that. And I'm like, so what's the panic? Why do I need to post on social media? And then I was able to sort of distill that down, like, well, what is the purpose? And it's like, okay, well, I guess it's people don't really find me via social media, except actually a few people have found me via some Instagram hashtags, which is pretty cool. And we can talk about that later. But generally they don't tend to find me, but they end up there because either they've found my website or someone's told them about me. So it's not how they find me, it's just where they end up. So then what's the purpose? Well, when I think about my own behaviors, I find someone's website and then I want to go to their social media because I just want to see what's happening now. What's the most relevant thing? So it's like, okay, so that's one reason. Another is people want to make sure you're still in business as well. Like if they can see something recent-ish, then they're like, okay, they're still around, and then, so I guess that was the other purpose. And the third purpose for me personally is it's a vehicle for self-expression. And that's, that's the fun bit. I think for me, because I know and I'm reminded that I've got other channels working, then it allows me to just do my art, I have contemplated going off altogether as well. And to be honest, it could, again, be the best thing for my well-being because I still, have difficulty. I can get into these grooves where I just keep looking at my phone. But it's probably broader than that because it's even email. Like I'll I can go email, Facebook, Instagram, So the issue is actually probably the smartphone more than anything. So that's sort of where it is for me. And then what I noticed with my clients, and especially because I've started talking more about this over the last year or so, they're saying, I don't want to be on social media. I want to be somewhere else. Or I don't, they just want another option. So they're feeling that call. And it's interesting because I don't know if you've ever heard this sort of recently. You hear this idea that websites are dead, Well, I'm not sure about that, especially in this climate. I mean, our platforms the rug could be pulled out from underneath us for any reason. And then what do we have? Nothing really. Yeah. So I have seen people that sort of cultivate that relationship with their audience through their website. So I find that for a lot of people I'm working with, they're more interested now in channeling their energy and their content through their website. And I'm certainly encouraging people to go, to just, I'm dissecting what's happened in my case. So, when I said that I have a blog, basically that brings in most of my audience, right? When I looked at what went on there, and it was like, well, I took one idea, which was human design, then I got a little bit more specific, human design generators, and then I connected that with business. Now it wasn't a real like strategic thing that I'm going to do this and this and this, but that's just what happened if I reverse engineer it. And so that's what makes it makes me very discoverable, right? Because if I was just to happen to write about just human design or just human design generators, so many people are writing about that. I would be, who knows what page I would be on, but because I've connected with business and marketing, I'm consistently on the first page. So then I'm like, okay, can I do this again? Because this is a few years ago that I wrote that blog, and I'm like, okay. And I did it in a very similar vein, because what happened is I have a lot of, I've had a lot of projectors, human design project. You know the human design system, do you?
Projector, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I've had projectors sort of go, they find out about me and they're like, well, Dani, do you have like an equivalent, course that, you have your generators for projectors? And basically just request for me to help and provide some sort of training. And like my response has been, well, I'm not a projector. And I'm also not a human design consultant. So, I kind of felt like that disqualified me a bit. But, when I'm working with people one-on-one, and I find out the basics of their design and things like that, of course I can help them, but I didn't have any blanket advice. But because I kept getting asked, I'm like, well, hold on a minute. I'm getting asked, but there's many ways to respond to this. So I interviewed a bunch of my clients. And then I also wrote a blog about being in business as a human design projector. Okay. So then 4 months later, that's basically all it took, 4 months for people to start, for me to kind of be discoverable under those terms. I started getting projectors join my list, and it was like, how did you find out about me? Google search human design projectors, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, this is cool, right? So it's like, if you get kind of like, there's a way that you can go about it without any sophisticated SEO, because it's just not even something I've done. And you can potentially, be way more discoverable. So I'm quite interested in that. And also quite interested in really supporting those people that support me. So when anyone joins my list, and as I said, I ask them, how did you find out about me? Normally they'll put the person's name, but there is a percentage of people that they will just like, and I even write in the form, be specific, can you tell me their name? And they'll go, a friend. Right. So I'm like, okay, so I write back and say, whatever, hello, blah, blah, blah. And they'll say, and I'd love to know who told you about me, because I'd really like to thank them. That's really, part of, that's part of my quiet marketing approach. And then they generally give me the name. And so then when I can thank that person, of course, but I can also channel some energy into supporting them, supporting their content, supporting, mentioning them in my newsletter, so doing stuff like that. So it's also cultivating, this little ecosystem that's going there.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And what I hear in this is kind of what occurs to me, is that, a lot of times we put our focus and energy in marketing on the strategies, and that's what's sold to us by most of the marketers and experts out there. Like, if you do this system that worked for me, it's going to work for you. But what I see you doing and modeling so beautifully and helping your clients to do is kind of looking around you. Like, all right, well, where are my clients coming from? What's happening here? Oh, gee, I wonder what, well, and then it occurs to you, well, what if I did more of that? It's a very grounded, simple, common sense, actually, way to look at it. Instead of chasing all these things and all these shiny objects and all these marketing strategies that I could try, I just look at, what's happening? what is happening now? Where am I moved? Where are
Yeah.
people responding to me? Where am I responding? And
Yeah.
look at that, which is kind of what human design is about, I think. And I'm not an expert either, but occasionally I find
Yeah.
it useful to look at just
Yeah.
as that inquiry, sort
Yeah.
of what is my way of marketing? What is my way of living? What's emerging
Yeah.
from me instead of trying to fit into the world? And
Yeah.
we can do that with marketing. I see you doing that. And it can be just that simple and organic. And you may have done that, written a post, and maybe it didn't work, but you would have learned something and tried
Yeah.
something else or been led to choose something. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've been looking at very, very naturally and gradually all of the, wow, there are a lot of alternatives to Facebook groups and social media and different ways to create memberships and community with your tribe, whoever that might be. I had no idea there were so many, and there are a
Mm.
lot of people exploring it. So the main takeaway that I have from all of this is if you don't like it, you don't have to. If you don't want to, don't. There's
Yeah.
another way.
Yeah. And like sometimes I feel, I don't know what the word is, but I'll just say weird or something, because that is my approach. It's like
Mm-hmm.
if someone really doesn't want to do something, and because I ask good questions to clients, like, okay, if you could be really Stephanie, how would you love to do this? And then this smile will come up, like, and that's how I felt when I first heard that question. It's like, well, if I could be really me, wow, let me tell you about that. And so, because I don't have this like real, it's funny, a lot of people will say, oh, talk against cookie cutter, systems, and yet they've actually got a cookie cutter system. Like, I
Yep.
find that really funny. But, I'm thinking about one of my clients that a few months ago I met with, and the main reason she met with me is because she just said, look, I just feel so stuck. I'm not sure about my business direction anymore. And I'm really stuck in whatever. And it was so interesting. It was like, what is it that you're not liking? And she's like, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I went, oh, right. And I said, so, well, what would you rather do? And she went, oh, and she went, boop, boop, boop. She had these three
Mm-hmm.
main ideas. I can't remember what they were exactly, but I was just like, and I'm like, well, it's like we somehow need permission, because all of the marketing trainings have essentially, I'm sure it's not intentional, but have made us lose trust in ourselves.
Mm.
And it's like disconnected us from our own creativity. And people are trying to make things look a certain way and show up so many times. And I mean, honestly, I don't know about you, Stephanie, but I look at, Instagram stories, for example, like I look at things that people are doing, and I have been inspired by that and gone, oh, I should do that. I should, and then I'm like, I have to do a reality check. It's like, Dani, really? Like, you really want to spend all of that time looking at your phone more so, and that's the thing. Like, I know that every time I say yes to another strategy, another platform, another course, another training, whatever it is that I'm saying yes to in business, generally I'm saying yes to more screen time. And is that what I really want?
Yeah.
I saw something the other day that looked so attractive by this coach I worked with a number of years ago, and she had this little membership thing that's so glamorous, and it was like, oh, it's only $20 a month and all of this. And it's like, the price was fine, but I'm like, think about it, like, now you're going to have this thing there that you should be doing. You're going to feel it's going to like take up some energy because you're not in there, and like, yeah, there's so many tentacles to this conversation, right?
Yeah. And I love what I hear you bringing to this is just that willingness to go, what do I really want? What is
Yeah.
really aligned? And that is a part of that slowing down process that we so seldom do. I feel it just talking to you, by the way. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. We
Yeah.
can. There's a
Yeah.
permission to do that, and I've seen it myself. It's kind of ridiculous, in a fun way. I mean this ridiculous what we do to ourselves in business, because business, what I love about it most is that we're creating something from nothing. It's like it's one of the most creative things we can do, along with all these other expressions of art and music and children and all the beautiful things. Everything we do is creative, and so is business. And yet we think it has to look a certain way, or somehow I've been conditioned into these ideas of what a business is supposed to look like. And so when I'm talking to a client and I say, well, you don't have to do that. Do you have to do that? And they go, I could, like, and if you want to do something, you can do it that way. Like, I can do that?
Yeah.
Like, I can?
Yeah.
And I want to laugh because, like, yeah, this is yours. You get to make it up the way you'd like to make it up.
Yeah.
And if you choose not to do social media and do nothing else, you're probably going to find that you're going to need another way to connect with clients. Right? That I'm not saying that it's just going to magically happen. There's kind of there's a co-creative process in attracting clients, and we are a part of that. Like you said, how can I be more discoverable? Which is a really interesting question. Like, and we can look at what you said as a strategy. And it's a good strategy, by the way. Like, okay, I don't even have to go into the SEO, but like, look at your website and which of your posts, if any, are getting traffic? Oh, well, what if I did that more? Or what if I created something around that? Made a funnel?
Yeah.
But my thought is that the reason that worked for you is because there was something about it that sparked you, that was inspiring, that was interesting. And you're like, I wonder what would happen. It wasn't you going, I'm going to implement this strategy and make it happen. It was a discovery process. And this is actually how we create. When we're doing it outside of business, we don't even often think about it because we have less on it, like, oh, it's got to be serious. But we can do it inside of business. What if we can just approach things with that curiosity?
Yeah. And it reminds me of one of the things that I say over and over again, share without an agenda, And if I look at that blog, I didn't have any human design product when I first wrote that. I was just like, I'm sharing this because this has been helpful to me, But a year later, when it started to pick up traction, or when I noticed that it was starting to pick up traction, I was then in more of a position, like I had done a workshop. So I was starting to sort of dabble in the realm of helping others. And so as I observed, and this is a thing, like, observe what's going on. If I hadn't I was looking at my Squarespace analytics app. I just love that app. It's so simple. It's Google Analytics is like crazy, but I could really see what was going on with Squarespace, and I was just like, wow, it's still getting more and more traffic, and it's growing. I thought it was just a one-off. I thought someone had just shared it in a group, and I was just getting this influx. And so while I watched it grow, it was like, wow, I wonder what I could do. I wonder, look, this is, I've been given this gift, how am I going to respond to this? People obviously need this information. So yeah, if I had never have even thought to sort of pause and notice and look what was actually happening, I would have missed that opportunity.
Yeah. I found something similar, by the way, and I had done some experiments in marketing for myself as a projector. Like, what is projector marketing?
Yeah.
And I've had people find me that way. And I've thought about this, like, oh, what if there was, and I don't feel qualified myself to actually teach a course in projector marketing, nor do I feel inclined to really go deeper with my human design studies to be able to do that in a way that I feel does it justice. But I was like, but I could find someone. And yet as things shift and change for me, I love it as a conversation point, but it's not something that I want. It's a little too formy. It's a little too, I just say like, it's a little too specific for me to go into. So like there's this noticing of that. Oh, and people who find me through these types of human design and marketing related posts are the kind of person who I resonate with. And yet, what's alive in me, if anything, to like, that's kind of what happens for me. And I think that approach puts the emphasis on what's alive, what's emerging from me, how, and since I'm a projector, I'll language it like this, what I'm invited, were the invitations that I'd like to say yes to, because I don't have to say yes to any of them.
Yeah.
So, like, what advice would you give to someone, Danielle, if they were considering, or like yourself, noticing, I don't like this social media thing the way I'm doing it? What would you suggest for them?
Well, I think the first question I would ask is, if you could be really, insert your name, how would you love to do this? Because I think things can really come out of that. I know one of the things that came out for that client that I was mentioning is, well, actually I can remember two of them now. One was something to do with her newsletter. There was something around that she felt excited to do something with. And you can be very creative with newsletters as well. For example, I've done a few audio newsletters, and when you click through that and you play it on SoundCloud, and I think that's a lot of fun, and it avoids sort of screen time. You could lie down and listen to it if you wanted. So she wanted to do something with that. The other one was she wanted to do these live classes, and of course something like that can be problematic in this climate, but I think she's able to do it. So she's had some pretty good ideas, that really if it were that she hadn't been noticing or listening to, if she had I like saying, have some tunnel vision. Don't look at what anyone else is doing. Just kind of like close yourself off from what other coaches and whatever people are doing, and just kind of be in your lane and do it how you want to do it. So it's about ask yourself that question, explore options, and notice what your own inner response is to that. Like if it's like, oh, that doesn't work, or that you can't do that, like where does that come from? And I mean, at the moment, I just want to tell everyone, I don't know if this can work for everyone, but I'm like, man, get some articles or something out there that your people are potentially looking for. Like make it more intentional based marketing rather than that whole interruption marketing. I'm going to turn up on your feed when you don't really want me to be there because you're trying to socialize. So it's like, how can we be more on the intentional based in terms of, yes, it's our intention, but it's their intention. They're looking. So yeah, I guess it comes back to how can you be more discoverable? And yeah, I do have an article on that lists things like, if you've learnt a modality or a system or been accredited in some way, make sure you've got a practitioner listing, and pay for an upgraded one if that's an option, because that can be a great way. So, get on your, business listings. I can't think of the other ones that are on there now, but we can always share that article.
I would love to link to that so that people could find it. Yeah, that's the other thing that's occurring to me as you're talking, is that there's just a willingness that you have to be intentional about things, to take a moment and think about it and sit with it. Is this working for me? How would I like to do it? If I could do it anyway, and then doing that with your clients. And even what you were talking about, your marketing or messaging calendar or messaging organizing system, or whatever you had mentioned it sounds like it's very intentional. So and yet I also heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's an artistic piece, like, oh, I'd like to share this, not for any specific intention to get new clients, but with an intention to share my art, which is different.
Yeah. And yeah, so just not to to clarify, not as in an art piece, like, oh, I've painted something, but whatever our art is,
yes,
you know, some words, some thoughts, some, you know, that kind of thing.
I think that that's something that also gets confused, because it's become, you must show up consistently on social media. And so that means like every day or multiple times a day or however many times this particular teacher is insisting you must show up. And so there's fluff content. It's like, oh, well, I'll just ask this question and we'll talk about, you know, share pictures of your pets. And then people will respond.
Yeah.
And like, okay, well, it's thinking about, what am I doing this for? What is my purpose here on social media? Am I looking for clients? And then thinking about, well, what could I post that would be helpful to those clients I work with? What can I share that they would find useful? What are they finding most useful right now? And how could I create more of that and share it? Or and make it a clear invitation. This is something I've been talking about, something called transformational content, which actually helps potential clients or people who might discover you to begin that transformational shift you provide right in that piece of content. It's a beautiful gift, and it's so natural. This is what's occurring to me. But then there are pieces of content that I just want to share because it pleases me.
Yeah.
Or because I'd like to see how people respond if they respond. And it's not to get clients. It's got a different purpose. That's okay too. It's not a rule. But if you are looking for clients, creating intentional content with that in mind will probably help.
Yeah. And it's like, it's that stuff that's like, you can view that you're being of service. You know?
Yes. Oh, and I love that.
Yeah. And I think that other stuff in between is really good because it's providing a different aspect of you, and people want to feel that connection. They want to feel like they know who you are. It makes you more approachable. And I think the other really important piece that I haven't mentioned that has made the world of difference is me taking more emotional risks in terms of sharing my opinion or point of view. So it's not necessarily this sort of vulnerability in sharing my story, which, you know, certainly I have, but and like some people have, you know, their stories are a lot more vulnerable for sure, but it's more like being vulnerable and going, you know, that I'm not doing that. And I know that you all do that, or I know there's an expectation to do that, but I tell you why I've decided no.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's sort of like, I mean, I don't really present it in that as direct as that, but it's more, I tend to naturally be able to take people on this little epiphany journey that I had so that they see what I see, you know, and that they can go away. And this is where, I've used that idea as well, like with a little transformation, you know, like there's been something therapeutic in that piece of content that, so I'm not just sort of dangling, you know, there's a lot of content out there that's sort of like, they're just always dangling, like, you want this, and you know, and they never really offer anything unless you sign up for something, of course. But it's like, I like that idea of being able to give a bit of a transformation in a piece of content, just one idea, even one, like sharing your own thought and process about something can be really transformational for someone because they just may never have thought of it that way. And once you say it, they can't even believe that they couldn't see it because it's so obvious. You know?
Yeah, there's a really powerful, it's taught as a strategy, but I don't like to look at it as a strategy because when it comes from within, it's not. The strategy is just in service of what's expressing itself through you. And that is something that I talk about is your contrarian voice of wisdom. So it's like, what do you believe that's different from the mainstream, or that's different from what most of your peers may be saying in this space, in this profession? What do you believe? How do you see things that your clients are misunderstanding that you can speak to? Very powerful and transformational. And it's also going to very quickly separate those who are aligned with you as a potential client and who might like to learn from you or work with you, and those who don't. Because if they're attached to the idea that you've got to hustle and push and go and go and go, and you're talking about let's get quiet and let's get intentional with our marketing, let's do less, let's slow down, they're going to run screaming. But the ones who are ready for that will go, you mean I don't have to post on social media? I get to do things my own way? And it's beautiful. And it does feel vulnerable because there is a polarization that may happen. And for me personally, one of my biggest fears has been I'll be misunderstood or I'll come across as judgmental.
Yeah.
And yet what wants to come through me, and put it that way, like it actually is a pretty bold voice, but it also comes with, this is how it looks to me. How does it look to you? This is, I don't hear people speaking to this. And I'd like to let it be out there for those it resonates with. It might not be you.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's very nerve-wracking. It can be very nerve-wracking to be, just stepping outside of the comfort zone and sharing something that, like especially your peers or industry or whatever, it's contrary to that. But something that has really helped me is this like reframe that my experience cannot be wrong because it's mine, and someone may come along and attempt to make me wrong, right? But how can they? Because this is my experience. It might be wrong for them or whatever, but and I thought, I just need to stand strong in my experience and what I felt, and like it really helped,
Yeah, I hear a lot of integrity in that for you, a lot of consistency in what you're putting out too, and even the way you're sharing human design. Like, well, I'm not the expert. I can share what's worked for me. And if you're talking about projectors, I'm not a projector. I'm going to talk to my projector clients and share that with you. Like that has, because you are saying like, well, this is their experience and this is my experience and what's yours? I love that, the invitation for that and what's your experience? How is it for you? From there, we can really create something alive, vibrant, emergent, creative. Cool.
And one final thing I'll say is, it just reminds me, I have one big thing that I've noticed for projectors, and I've kind of already mentioned it. It comes down to this sharing your point of view. And I just have this really good example because one of my clients, she's sort of been with me, in different group programs and things over the last few years. When we first started working together, she was literally just sharing her art, like, and I mean her artwork, paintings, and she was a coach, or is still a coach, but she was basically sharing her artwork and pottery and stuff like that. And I used to think, I don't know, there was nothing I could say to that. Like, nice, I don't know, what do I say to this, or how do I make that? But then, kind of fast forward a few years down the track and specifically to, when was it? Well, about this time last year, I really was noticing how she was sharing her point of view on things. Specifically, she wrote this post about visibility. Now, I had written something about 6 months earlier that went really well, surprisingly well. But what she wrote, it was adding an element to it that I hadn't covered. And I was like, man, that's good. And just the way she'd outlined it, it almost, the points were just like, that's actually a class right there. So I invited her to collaborate on a class. Now, if she had not have shared what she was thinking around this subject, never would have happened, right? And then again, she was sharing something else about this idea of Shakti and leadership and this kind of thing. And I was like, I really wanted to understand more about that. I wanted to bring it into my group program. And I'm like, look, would you facilitate one of these classes? Like, would you be the guest presenter? And again, it was a paid invitation, If she hadn't been sharing her thoughts, it wouldn't have happened. So it's like, for me, it's like, if you are a projector, and you're waiting, because there's this whole thing that you've got to wait for the invitation, right? Now, this is how I see it. Yes, wait for the invitation before you create like some big offering, right? Because that probably won't work. But you don't need an invitation to share your point of view, just to share what's happening, to share what you're seeing in the world. I really don't think you need that invitation. I think you can just do that without an agenda, and that's part of your art. And that gets the cogs turning of human design. People get to see that. People start thinking. People start going, hey, I want to invite that wisdom in. So that's my main thing for projectors. Like, I mean, I think everyone should be, sharing their point of view, but, it's in many ways, life is a lot easier for generators because they can see something and respond. They don't really even need someone to be asking, but you have got to look for patterns and blah, blah, blah. But it opens up doors for projectors if they share their perspective.
And that actually is something that projectors have so much to share in their perspective. They see so much that if we share it, there's something of value there for the people we're here to connect with and guide and serve, for sure. Yeah. That's beautiful.
And yet at the same time, there's got to be caution against, like, don't give people unsolicited advice.
Right. Yeah, it's sharing a point of view is different.
Yeah,
this is my experience.
Without an attachment to anything. Yeah, I mean, because I think that's what I've noticed with projectors. I've had a few that have, I've noticed, like, man, they just keep giving me unsolicited advice, like, it's really annoying. And I understand because they see so much and they want to, but it needs to be on an individual basis, of course, invited.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that, Danielle. Thank you for sharing all of this. You've been very generous with sharing your own experience, both with me and also on your website. So where's the best place for people to find you if they'd like to connect with you?
Well, since we're talking about not being on social media a bit.
Well, if it is on social media, it could be there, wherever it really is.
Yeah. But I would suggest my website, which I'm sure you'll put the link below, but it's danigardner.com. And I do hang out a little bit on Instagram. It's sort of very much, I love pictures. I'm a photographer at heart. So I have, I like having a pretty little gallery there, and also on Facebook. I'm there a couple of times a week, but probably taking a break because I'm having December off, and I don't know. I imagine I'm probably going to do some reading of books and stuff. And sometimes often when I'm reading, I get through like a quarter of a chapter and all of these ideas are coming in. And then I feel like I just want to share those. So I'll see how I go. I might end up sharing in that period that I'm off.
Yeah, but there's a nice space for it, for not having to. Yeah, beautiful. Sure. And I do highly recommend, if you're listening to this and you resonate with what Dani's saying, go to her website, get on her email list, because she's really sharing content like this that doesn't have an agenda, that's useful, that's designed to really help you. I love the way you put it, like help people have the epiphanies. If it's for them, they'll follow the journey that you had in thinking and discovery and go, oh, what's that? And that's the spark of seeing something new. It's insight. So I found very valuable and different than what we're typically used to. So check it out. And thank you so much. Thank you, Danielle. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been a really lovely chat. Thanks, Stephanie.